Fear is a signal, not a command. By Jason Gray. January 5th, 2026, 6026, Anno Lucis, in the Year of Light. Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Most people believe fear is something to eliminate. They treat it like an enemy, a flaw, a weakness to overcome or outrun. This misunderstanding quietly ruins lives. Fear is not the problem. Obedience to fear is. Fear is a signal. It is information moving through the body. It points to uncertainty, risk, exposure, or the unknown. Fear does not know what to do about those things. It only knows how to alert. When fear is mistaken for authority, it becomes a tyrant. Most people do not notice the moment fear crosses that line. It happens quickly and invisibly. A sensation arises, tightness in the chest, contraction in the stomach, acceleration of thought, and almost immediately, the mind begins translating sensation into instruction. Do not say that. Do not go there. Do not wait. Do not risk it. Fix this now. Get out. Prove yourself. Hide. At that moment, fear is no longer informing. It is directing, and life begins to shrink. The fracture begins when fear is treated as truth. Fear is persuasive because it feels urgent. It speaks in absolutes. It compresses time. It frames in extremes. It tells you that something must be handled now, before clarity has a chance to arrive. Fear does not ask questions. Fear issues warnings, and warnings feel responsible. This is how people come to trust fear more than their own discernment. They confuse anxiety with intuition. They mistake tension for wisdom. They believe that if something feels frightening, it must be dangerous. Fear is not a measure of danger. It is a measure of unfamiliarity. Fear reacts not only to threats, but to growth. Not only to risk, but to truth. Not only to danger, but to freedom. This is why fear often intensifies right before something meaningful changes. When you are about to set a boundary, fear appears. When you are about to tell the truth, fear appears. When you are about to stop pretending, fear appears. When you are about to step out of an old role, fear appears. Fear does not distinguish between harm and transformation. It only detects exposure. This is why so many people remain stuck while telling themselves they are being cautious. They are not being cautious. They are being governed. Fear becomes a quiet ruler. It dictates what you avoid. It dictates what you delay. It dictates what you tolerate. It dictates what you never attempt. Over time, this creates a life defined less by choice and more by evasion. People do not pursue what matters. They pursue what feels safe. Safety, when defined by fear, becomes a very small place. This is how people wake up years later feeling regret without knowing exactly when they gave up ground. It was not one big decision. It was hundreds of small obediences. Fear says, not yet. Fear says, be careful. Fear says, you will lose something. Fear says, you cannot afford this, and slowly life contracts around those instructions. This is not because fear is evil. It is because fear is limited. Fear has no vision. Fear has no patience. Fear has no sense of proportion. Fear cannot see who you might become if you do not listen to it. The reorientation begins when fear is repositioned. Fear must be felt, but not followed. The moment fear arises, most people rush to escape it by distraction, reassurance, action, or avoidance. Fear does not need to be escaped. It needs to be held. When you hold fear without obeying it, something important happens. The body learns that fear is survivable. The nervous system learns that sensation is not catastrophe. The mind learns that urgency is not authority. Fear begins to lose its dominance. This is not bravery. This is clarity. Bravery still treats fear as something to overcome. Clarity sees fear for what it is, a temporary state, not a verdict. When fear is allowed to exist without being promoted to command, it often changes. It softens. It reveals what it was protecting. Sometimes it fades entirely. Sometimes it remains, but it no longer controls. This is how authority returns. Authority does not come from eliminating fear. Authority comes from staying present while fear speaks and choosing anyway. A person with authority can feel fear and still act. They can feel fear and still wait. They can feel fear and still remain silent. They do not confuse discomfort with danger. This is what maturity looks like. Not fearlessness, but discernment under pressure. As fear loses its grip, life expands. You stop abandoning yourself to stay comfortable. You stop negotiating with imagined outcomes. You stop asking fear for permission to live honestly. You begin moving toward what is true instead of away from what is uncomfortable. Fear still appears, but it no longer decides, and that changes everything. Fear is allowed to speak, but it is no longer allowed to decide. Jason Gray. I definitely used to live by letting fear command me, and I feel like it's because it's powerful for sure, and it's instinctual for humans to do that. But I also really feel like it's because I wasn't taught to do otherwise. I witnessed the adults in my life sometimes letting fear consume them and determine their reactions and responses, being fearful. And so that's what I learned. And for better or worse, then I had to learn on my own how not to let fear control me. And that's why it took decades. I mean, I feel like I only learned how to not let fear control me in the last 5 years. And it was through extreme suffering and realizing that I had to change something, or my life was going to go to places that I didn't want it to. And I'm grateful for that lesson, and I know that it is more powerful because I had to learn it on my own. But I also think that, humans are going to experience fear no matter what in life and learn these lessons on their own. So if we could give our children a little bit more of a hand up in life on dealing with fear and talking about these things that Jason wrote about in this piece, then the world would likely be a better place. Thank you for that writing, Jason.